Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We are recording this on Thursday afternoon, June 5th. It is being shown on Shabbat, June 7th. So, colleagues, I want to begin this class with a very clear memory that I have. It's a repeated series of memories that I have from experiences that Shira and I used to have before the pandemic. This is all pre-pandemic, but before the pandemic, we had this tradition of going to Israel every year. And very often on the way home, we would go to some European place. And I remember in 2016, I was saying Kaddish for my mother. And this was, again, pre-pandemic, before online minyanim, before you could just click and say Kaddish. If you wanted to say Kaddish, you needed 10 people. You needed a building where there were Jews davening. And I was in London, and I went to 5 different shuls, depending on where we were, so that I could say Kaddish every morning and night for my mother. And I will never forget the feeling that the word that came to my mind every time in England in 2016 was Marano. Marano, hidden Jews. That is, the synagogues, and I scoped it all out. I was very machmir on saying Kaddish for my mother. I knew exactly where they were. I knew the address. I got there, and they were hidden synagogues. And I was told, bring your passport. And there were always Israeli security guards, armed. This is pre-Pittsburgh, armed security guards. They were always Israeli. They were always suspicious. I would always give them my passport. I would say Kadavi Kadash, and I'd walk out of there thinking, oh my God, I just am so grateful that I don't live in London, England. But the truth is that the experience that I had there, I had in every European place that I went to. In France, we went on a Jewish tour of Paris, and here's the place where all of our Jews were lined up and sent to their death camps. And I remember once we went to a house that was a museum, gorgeous place in Paris, and you listen with the museum audio, and you get extra credit. If you want to learn more, you can hear more about this. And on the very last unit of the last thing that the walking tour had, if you wanted extra credit, they said, oh, by the way, this house used to be owned by Jews. It was expropriated from the Jews. The Jews were collected and sent off to Auschwitz, where they all perished. That's why this house is available for museum, but they didn't lead with it. It was hidden. You go to Venice, and you get the ghetto. And then the most florid example of this is in Barcelona. Barcelona is got this Gaudi church. I mean, it's definitely a wonder of the world. Before you leave the world, go to Barcelona to see it. The church has been in process for over 140 years. 140 years. They've spent over €1 billion on it. It's the most magnificent edifice ever. You feel it's gorgeous, it's tall, you can hardly see the end of it. And then the day that we went to the church in Barcelona, the Gaudi church, we went to a shul. And the shul is literally a pit. It's literally in the basement somewhere. It's dark. There's no windows. So the church, the shul is in a pit, in place after place, Europe. And I always had the feeling, thank God I don't live in Europe. Europe is enchanting. It's magical. The wine is great. The food is great. The museums are great. The streets are amazing. It's beautiful in Europe. And it always ends badly for the Jews in Europe, and wow, thank God I get to go back home and live in America. And all of that long prelude is because in the wake of the firebombing of Josh Shapiro's house on April 13th, and in the wake of the murder of Yaron and Sarah, who were ages 30 and 26, about to get engaged in Jerusalem the next week. They worked for the Israeli embassy. They were gunned down in Washington. And in the wake of what happened in Boulder, where you had 15 people who were firebombed when they were marching for the release of hostages, which is obviously the only morally tenable position, is to demand the release of hostages. There's no contrary moral position. And they were firebombed. And in each case, the suspect said, this is because of Palestine. This is because of Gaza. And in the wake of all that, Daniel and Yossi did a podcast. It's the first podcast since October 7th, which is called Israel at War. It's the first podcast that's not about Israel at war. It's called The War on the Jews. And they offer that this is a new chapter for American Jews, and they call it the Europeanization of American Judaism, the Europeanization of the American Jewish community. And I thought all those times, I thought to myself, thank God I don't live in Europe, and only to hear now that de Tocqueville, Daniel and Yossi think we actually do live in Europe. So that is the sober message that we got to think about in these sober times. So let's thank God for the gift of learning Torah together.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah, v'haretna Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'finu u'b'fi amcha Beit Yisrael, ונהיה אנחנו בצאצאינו ובצאצאי עמך בית ישראל, כולנו לומדי שמך ולומדי תורתך לשמה. ברוך אתה אדוני המלמד תורה לעמו ישראל, ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים ונתן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
So Josh Shapiro's house, these two young people murdered before they're engaged, and then Boulder. Are you feeling that we are living in a new era in terms of your own comfort level, how it makes you feel to live and roll out of bed as an American Jew? How do you feel about it for yourself? How do you feel about it for your children? All of us here have children, our own children. And how do you feel about it for the children of our congregation? Are we living in a new era? How are you processing this moment?
Yeah, I would say 36 years ago, when Sue and I were on our honeymoon in Portugal, it was already that scenario. We went to look at the shul and go into the shul. Didn't have our passports with us. We had to go back to the hotel, get the passports, etc. And it was an Israeli guard. I was even speaking to Hebrew with him, and he still wouldn't let us in to look. So it's sadly that's an old story. The other thing is that I think that maybe we've become a little bit inured of the fact that that we are, in a sense, we're already living in that world because we have security here all the time. That we didn't have that before.
Right. So that's post-Pittsburgh. So do you feel, Michelle, Elias, do you feel that it's worse? Are we in a post-Pittsburgh? Is this even worse than Pittsburgh or not?
Well, it's interesting when I speak to some of our members, one of the things that they point out is in the post-Pittsburgh world, there was fear about synagogue and a sense of, we need to put the security in place, make sure to help people feel comfortable coming back into synagogue. What I hear from some of our members that has changed for them is this is about being Jewish in public. And it's about all spaces, anywhere that you are, where you are publicly identifying as not just in solidarity with Israel, but even as just simply being a Jew.
Right. So in other words, neither Washington nor Boulder nor Pennsylvania happened in a shul. It was all people doing life outside a shul. And so, not to be a cliche, but how does that make you feel?
So, look, I am both, of course, torn and frightened for our world right now and for the very real extremist threat that we face not only in America but around the world. And, one of the stories that I remember from my younger days in California was a shooting of a Jewish preschool and how much that shaped how I moved through the world and sort of miraculously kind of abated. There was this fever and then there were many years of quiet. And I don't know how, because it feels very much like we're ramping up, not slowing down. But I do have some sense that we may have the ability somehow, if we can get control again over our social media and sort of political conversation around Israel, that perhaps there may be a way to continue to make these fringe again rather than the norm.
So Michelle, I love you.
That's my hopefulness.
Yeah, so I love you so much. I've been working with you for a long time. and I know you. There's a lot of words where you're wanting to say it's not so bad. A lot
No,
of
I'm
words,
not saying it's not so bad. It is so bad.
Yeah, but you're trying to talk yourself into that it's not as urgent as, Daniel and Yossi talk about a normalization of hate. They talk about a Europeanization of the American Jewish community. I hear you.
Which
all
I
your
would
words,
affirm
your
all
words,
of that.
Your words are trying to bump against that.
No, my words are affirming all of that and still kind of trying to do a Jeremiah move of refusing to let that shape my vision of what is possible.
Elias, I'm so curious about you because your formative deal is Jew hatred in Buenos Aires and the destruction of the JCCs and nobody ever being held to account. And you come here, so you're going to bring your beautiful sons into a world where Jews are free at last. And now we got this. How are you processing this moment?
Yeah, so I was thinking when you were doing your presentation about how my life changed when I was maybe early 20s, because all of a sudden there were the two huge bombings of the Jewish community in Argentina, the embassy and the JCC, and then everything changed. I mean, you would walk on the streets, you were afraid to be going to Jewish buildings. All the synagogues started having this, not only security, but all these huge concrete, barriers for the cars not to run, to get into the sidewalk and explode. That was the two ways same way that they blew up the buildings. And we had to adjust to that new reality. And even thinking about leading services inside the temple and thinking that, somebody can come and explode the whole thing, blow it up. So that was one reality. Yes, for when I came here, I couldn't believe it, how safe and how nice it was to be as a Jew, to live as a Jew. Now things can change completely. And on my own personal case, I was asking Melissa the other day about how do you handle the news? Because it's so hard to get home and not to start reading the news. And when you start reading the news, as you know very well, if you have Facebook, if you have Instagram, everything is like, the algorithm is all based on your topics that you are interested in. So it's like bad things about the Jews everywhere in the world. Like you don't know what to do with that. It's hard to sleep. Hard to get distracted.
Right.
What do? You go to the gym, you listen to music, you watch a TV show, but then your mind is always thinking about that.
So so I guess here's my question. Do you think when Daniel and Yossi say that we're in a new era and it's a scary new era, do you think that is accurate or hype? Do you think that's an overreaction?
Super accurate.
Super accurate.
Super accurate. Because we don't know how it's going to develop.
Right. So let me.
We don't know how bad.
I want to.
Just one little thing to end. We don't know how much worse it's going to get.
Right.
And this idea that we have to do a better job in social media and control that.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Eliza, you're from, I know that you grew up in Denver and, your shul of your youth was in Boulder. So this last one cuts really close to home. You have real strong Boulder connections. It's like, 35 minutes from your house, from your front door. How are you processing all this?
I was talking with my sister because the attack actually happened in front of the courthouse. There's like this beautiful green area, and we used to go there after religious school every week, and we would have dinner on that grass.
Where it was firebombed, you used to picnic.
Every week. And there was a falafel place there. There might still be we would go there, sometimes we would go out, sometimes we'd pack dinner, but we would sit out there. And if we were really good, we could go walk along the Pearl Street Mall, and the busker might still be there. And we could see there was a contortionist and there were these magicians, and it was a hit. And Boulder felt like the safest place ever. Like you could walk barefoot. Like you didn't worry. Like people, it was so crunchy, so granola. And it's that is like that it happened in Boulder is shocking. That it happened to, what could be Temple Emmanuel in Boulder. It's a conservative shul. It's our community. It's literally our community in Boulder, and the hate that would inspire someone to attack community elders who are just asking for literally the safety and well-being of their community members, that's horrific. So it really shook me. It continues to shake me. I am also cognizant of the fact that this is the second mass tragedy in Boulder in recent years with the grocery store shooting, the King Super shooting that happened.
And what's
just
the relevance
recently.
of that?
So I think there's a tension between our own pain and feeling of being exposed and targeted, and just the reality of the insanity of our world. That was a shooting that targeted a grocery store where that was where we would stop for snacks on the way into school sometimes, and it was just a random grocery store shooting that ended a bunch of people's lives for racism, for hate, not anti-Semitism, but similarly, Boulder is like the epicenter of crunchy granola college life in Colorado. It's such a hippie place and such a loving place and such a welcoming place and such a fun place. And that hate could strike in both of these scenarios, right? Where people are just doing their grocery shopping, and then people who are just existing as Jews in public is shocking. And I think the tension I'm feeling is, how much should we take it personally that this is becoming European reality, that we are entering a new reality of anti-Semitism where we should hide our chamsas and hide our mezuzahs and be worried about being publicly Jewish? And how much is this just the insanity of our time, that there are these random intense acts of violence at movie theaters and grocery stores and all over? And sometimes they happen to us and sometimes they don't. And where's the balance? And how do we sort that out? And I'm really struggling with that.
Elisa, I want to draft off your energy for a minute and your reference to the grocery store shooting as well. It feels like there's a toxic brew of about 4 things going on that add to fuel to the fire on Israel and Gaza and Israel and Palestine. First of all, you have a pandemic of loneliness. All the suspects are loners. You have a pandemic of mental illness. There's just a lot of people who struggle with mental illness, and you put loneliness and mental illness. They don't have somebody who loves them. They don't have a partner who loves them. They don't have parents who love them.
But this shooter did. This shooter was married with kids, and that's even the most shocking part.
So one of them was.
Can I say a couple of things?
I'm not done yet. And then you also have the availability of guns just everywhere around. And Daniel points that out in a podcast, but we know that all too well. There's just too many guns. And then to your point earlier, Michelle, just the echo chambers of hate. So if you're a loner, if you have mental illness, if your best friend is a screen, and if that screen just deepens hate, and if you have guns all over the place, then you had all that. It's like kindling wood that's just ready to explode. And then you throw in Israel and Gaza, and then we have what we've had.
Not Israel and Gaza, and poverty or racism, or like you throw in some reality that feels oppositional. But I also think that I'm not sure that the loneliness diagnosis and the so all of that serves us. I think that there's a social ill that goes beyond loneliness, that goes beyond social connection, that goes beyond ideas, that we are becoming. We're normalizing acts of terror in a way that I could never imagine.
And there's a social piece.
Yeah, Elias, you were.
A few things I want to say. I think that more than the pandemic and the loneliness, social media has destroyed our world. Anybody who has an opinion, no matter what, you see I love Messi, who is a soccer player. Who can deny Messi's ability? Hate and hate and hate. He's a faker, penalties, and the FIFA only granted him a World Cup. Hate, pure hate for anything you see in the world. That is social media. That's what social media has caused to this world. Second, you mentioned it, Wes. We are around 200 countries in the world. The only country in the world that you don't need a permit to get a gun is America. That says a lot about violence and about our country. Second, maybe you want to take the conversation to this topic or not. I just saw a video of the Boulder, that guy who, used the Molotov, and he is driving in a car saying Allah is more powerful than Zionists and than America. Repeating that. He recorded himself. What is that guy doing in America? Illegally. what is that guy doing in America?
Yeah.
So, wait, can
that
I-
is,
can
I,
I
I
circle
wanted
us
the
back?
immigration piece.
Yes.
It feels really important to name.
Right.
He came here. He overstayed a visa, but he had applied for asylum. The reality was all of this happened under this current presidency. He was documented in the sense that he was in proceedings, in immigration proceedings. I don't think that helps
Right.
in this.
So
So
I
can
wanna-
can I circle us back for just
Yeah.
1 second?
One
to
more thing.
the-
No, I need to answer to her, and then you'll take the
Yeah.
word. I came to America as an immigrant, all right, because I wanted the perspective of being in a better country than the one that I was, both religiously and work-wise. I adore this country, all right. I will never occur to me, I have to be mentally ill to record myself a video saying I hate America, all right. It's like an
That's-
oxymoron. It's like
But I
you
So
know,
think
wait,
that's
guys,
the reality of this
can I just
situation.
can I just say
zoom
one
out?
thing
Yeah.
to zoom out,
Real quick,
please?
like, 'cause we need to
Because
zoom out.
I think when I spoke about the possibility, the Jeremiah moment that is possible, it has everything to do. A few days ago on Shavuot, Rabbi Jason Rubenstein stood here on this beam and he talked about the toxic and corrosive nature of the current sort of social the social conversation that's happening about anti-normalization, which means that once upon a time, if you held two different positions, you would get into a room together. And he said, now, today, in order to start a conversation between those who support Palestinians and those who support Israel, the pro-Palestinian side will say, we cannot have a conversation until you disavow any connection to Israel and you affirm that Israel is wrong. So much so that I actually just read an article in the Times of Israel about a Montreal dance studio who are no longer teaching a particular style of dance that happens to have originated in Israel. And when you have that kind of approach to others, where you say, like, their dance has nothing to do with politics, but I can't even teach this style of dance because it's affiliated. You have a toxic environment that one would hope that we as a society could repair our illness here.
So I want to thank you for that, Michelle. So I want to zoom out and ask the following question, which was part of the energy of Daniel and Yossi's podcast. They have a lot of energy around thinking about right-wing anti-Semitism, Nazis and neo-Nazis in Charlottesville, and the Jews will not replace us, anti-Semitism, and left-leaning anti-Semitism. What are your thoughts about that? Is that a question that animates you? How do you think about the particular kind of anti-Semitism that we're contending with now that's responsible for Boulder and for DC, and for Pennsylvania?
I'm going to piss a lot of people here with this opinion that I have. But I have to say, because that's what I feel, it's all coming from the left.
Obviously.
It's all coming from the left. It's, and we as Jews have to start thinking about, the kind of loyalty and affiliations we have, and to reconsider that. Because historically you supported a party here, political party, that doesn't mean that today, in this day and age, is the best option for us.
So I wanna ask a question. I want to ask Michelle and Eliza to respond, because we've had some creative, conversations and tensions over the years. I've been thinking about how the virus of Jew hatred and anti-Semitism has mutated, and here's. I want to offer this that builds on the insight that it's from the left, and talk about what's distinctively different and scary about it now. By the way, the whole right-left anti-Semitism that Daniel and Yossi talked about, not my issue. It's just not my issue. Here's my issue. On October 7th already, a lot of the proper left in America, including faculty at major universities, including Harvard's Divinity School, including the 32 organizations at Harvard who said it's entirely Israel's fault, they felt the following, which is this is on October 7th, before Israel fought back. This is when all we had was 1,200 murdered Jewish civilians. It's okay. They shouldn't be there. And they're colonialists, they're colonizers, and they're wrong, and there's a context, and they're murdered, and it's okay. They were not losing any sleep. They were actually supportive of the fact that we killed 1,200 Jews, okay? They were Israeli Jews. And it feels now like that virus has mutated. It's not only okay to kill Israeli Jews who live in the Gaza envelope, it's okay to kill American Jews who support Israel. And I think this has a lot to do with DEI. Whatever the theory of DEI was originally, in practice, DEI says the following things. If you're white, you're guilty. If you're white and Jewish, you're doubly guilty. If you're white and Jewish and you have resources, you're triply guilty. And if you're white and Jewish and you have resources and you support Israel, not only will we not dance your song, but you're quadruply guilty. And if you are killed in the name of Gaza and Free Palestine, that's okay. So the kind of reaction that was okay, and I remember I went to Harvard to a rally of the Israeli students, and they said that on October 7th, they were looking for support from their friends. And their friends said, no, we're okay with all the dead Jews. And that has now mutated. And that was on October 7th, before the war. And now that has now mutated, that if you support Israel, it's okay if you're also killed. And I think that is the distinctive brand of Jew hatred that is now in this. It's just like, you know, COVID and every flu, it mutates per season. That's where we're at. Am I off here?
Yes. I would say you're not off in that DEI has been a mask that people have worn to further anti-Semitic agendas. But I don't think the fault is with DEI. DEI in itself is about inclusion and about access and about being mindful and progressive as a society. The values at its core are good. But just as we wouldn't say that simply because the left is the source of so much anti-Semitism that everything they stand for is wrong, right? We wouldn't say that. There are certainly things they stand for that are wrong. But we're not going to abandon or I'll speak for myself, I'm not going to abandon a conviction that we should have health care for all, that we should have a government that supports its people in particular ways, simply because the left also promotes this horrific anti-Semitism. And we also wouldn't give up on Israel. There are ministers in the government in Israel who are saying awful things, and yet we don't give up on Israel because they say those awful things or because they use their positions of power to further terrible agendas. We say we are committed to Israel, the ideal that it could be, the ideal that it should be, and we love Israel more than what is happening now. I think that's true for DEI, and I don't think it serves us to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So I hear you.
Yeah, I just want to say, what you say is, with every fiber of my being, I hate DEI, and with every fiber of my being, I believe it to be evil. I believe it to be about hate.
But you don't. You
and
believe in the
and
values.
it's hate that's directed against the Jewish people and the Jewish homeland. And
You
that's
believe in
demonstrable.
inclusion.
From October 7th to now, it's demonstrable. And it went from we're okay killing Israeli Jews, who, by the way, were lefties, and that's why they lived in the Gaza envelope, because they believed in peace. They're okay with that. Now they're okay with firebombing Governor Shapiro's kids the night after the seder, just because.
But that's not DEI. Wes, I agree with you. The people that are promoting anti-Semitism, evil. The ideas are evil, but that's not DEI. You believe in DEI. You believe in inclusion. You believe in creating an accessible community. What you don't believe is using that idea, using that title as a cover for hate. You don't believe in that, but that's not DEI.
Well, it's been so bastardized and so co-opted that, when you think about, I remember talking to David Wolpe about, he was at the divinity school at Harvard. The divinity school of Harvard, and these men and women of God who teach God could not condemn October 7th on October 7th. And they could not condemn October 7th on October 8th before Israel ever fought back. Why? Because there's a context, and it just is. And that is DEI. It's the scarring event of my lifetime.
One thing I want to say, Michelle and I were at the March of the Living, and we visit the Hartman Institute. Gorgeous, by the way. And Tal Becker came to talk to us. And he said something, he put it in better words, obviously, that are how I'm going to describe it, that for decades, the American Jewry believe in the model that if we build societies where the minorities are thriving and we support the minorities, we as Jews are going to be thriving. So therefore, we support the Me Too, we support the gays and lesbians, we support the women's rights, civil rights, everything that the American Jewry has been doing for decades. And then all of a sudden, we realize that we are alone. Because none of these institutions officially, perhaps individuals obviously, like everywhere, none of them say anything about what's going on. And it's a model that it has failed.
Can I just tell you one last thing? I'm just want to hear you. After I heard Yossi and Danielle, Yossi pointed out that President Obama couldn't do a full-throated repudiation of October 7th. I loved President Obama. I believed in President Obama. I voted for President Obama twice. His election and re-election were highlights for me. And after the election, after the last podcast, I Googled President Obama on October 7th. And Yossi is 100% right. Even President Obama could not do a full-throated repudiation of October 7th. It was a comma, and then he talked about the unbearable situation for Palestinians and the occupation and unbearable, and he got big applause when he started naming that. And if that's President Obama, that's the left, and that's where we are. And it's, by the way, I want to say, I think we're in denial. I used to be a lefty. We're in denial if we don't get that. Michelle?
Look, this is such a sobering and heartbreaking conversation because so many of us have experienced that sense of abandonment from the very communities that we were deeply committed to. And what's so hard about it is remain committed to the ideals and ideas that really constitute an approach to the world where we see the B'Tselem Elohim, we see the the image of God, we see the Yerushalayim Shel Mala, the heavenly Jerusalem that can be brought down to this earth. That's who we are as Jews. And so I think one of the traumas that we are enduring in this moment is that we continue to believe in those principles but feel alone and unseen.
Yeah. So I want to bring in. I just want to bring in. I want to bring this down to. We're here in the Rabbi Chill Sanctuary, and we all have congregants that we do life with and do celebrations with, etc. I want to ask you how you are processing. If you think about your day job, which is for clergy is a day job and a night job, and it's a 7-day and night a week job, and how you roll with our people. I want to ask you to think about how you deal with the realities of what our people are going through, with the bar mitzvah this week, with the bat mitzvah this week, with the ofruf this week, with the 50-year celebration this week. And I'll just throw out there, one of my favorite books was written by Joseph Telushkin on the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Menachem Mendel Schneerson, for my money, and this is hardly a chiddush, I mean, many would say this, I subscribe to the prevalent view here, he's by far the most effective rabbi in the modern period. Nobody can touch him. What he created, unbelievable. And here's a guy who goes through the Holocaust. And here's a guy whose people are decimated by the Holocaust. And here's a guy who experienced the brunt of anti-Semitism. And it's his tradition to talk only about optimism and Simcha Shemitzvah. Joseph Telushkin points out that Chabad to this day doesn't really do the Shoah. They don't make it simmus about the Shoah. If you run into a Chabadnik in their mitzvah tank, they don't have the Shoah, they don't have October 7th. They have candlesticks, they have tefillin, they have challah, they have Simcha Shemitzvah. So I want to ask you, how do we do that? Like, how do we talk about, like, Eliza, you're preaching this Shabbos, and there's all this Simcha and all this end of year Happy June graduation and ofrufs and wedding anniversaries, etc. And here you come in with a 2x4. They hate us and they're killing us. And so how do you think about managing all of this conflicting energy?
Yeah, first of all, I don't think, personally speaking, I don't think that I have that in me.
You don't
You
have
know,
what in you?
this ability of saying positive.
That's
let's do
okay.
mitzvah.
That
Let's
is
do
not
mitzvah.
true.
I was
Because
gonna say,
Let's do mitzvah. Let's do that. No, I
That
don't
is-
have that. And second, thank God I don't have to give sermons on Shabbat.
Wait, but Elias, I have a proof text exactly opposite, because what I was just about to bring into this conversation is something that you taught me, and it is a story that you shared with our people when we were in Poland at the March of the Living, and you spoke about the story of that incredible melody of Ani Ma'amin. And there was the composer, right, on the cattle car being carted off to Auschwitz. And in that cart says, if somebody will risk their life and jump off and make this one melody continue to go and move through the world, I'll give you half of my share in Olam Haba, my entire share in Olam Haba. What was a big share in Olam Haba, right, in the coming world. And it does happen. And somebody gets off of that train, that melody continues, and the words are, I believe with a full heart in the coming of the Messiah and the coming of redemption, even though that tarries, even though it's not here yet. And you taught that text, and you inspired us with the idea that even when things are really, really awful, that there is some arc of our history, if we hold on to simcha shel mitzvah, to the joy of being a part of our tradition, to the music that lifts and inspires us, that somehow we can find a different path.
I believe I agree with you. I believe that we should continue doing what we are doing, but not doing even more intensely. They are not going to get rid of us.
Elisa, how do you think about, the coming Shabbos, you're giving a sermon?
Thank
No bar
God. Yeah,
mitzvah.
I was so grateful when I saw my name on
Alisa,
the
there is no bar
organization.
mitzvah, so that is one.
But when I saw it, I was just like, wow, this is
Yeah.
great. So here's what I love. One of the things that I love about the work that we do is that we get to be spiritual magicians. And that's not just true for anti-Semitism in the world, but that's true when you have a family that's just experienced an intense loss right before a simcha. And that's true when, you've had a really hard day dealing with whatever circumstances of life that we deal with in the shul, and you go home and you have to be there for your family and your kids, and you can't just walk in the door and be like, sorry, I've used up all of my energy today, I just need to go in my room and cry. Like, you actually have to be there and be looking at birds and, well, my goodness, there's a frog. Like, that's what it takes to be in this world. And so our work is, how do we summon the spiritual strength, the fortitude to create a different reality, to make a space here where people can come, where it's not doom and gloom and terror and awfulness, where it's actually hope, where it's actually goodness, where it's actually, no, our people, we have thrived for thousands of years in worse situations than we're in today. And we'll do it again, and we'll keep moving, and we're going to keep growing. That's our blessing. And I think to be able to do that, we meet with people before they're having a surgery, or before they're going into an intense life moment, or when they're grieving the loss of a marriage or the loss of a loved one. We have the ability to craft holiness, to create a moment where things feel a little bit better.
So what do you think, Elisa? Who could argue with what you just said? But what do you think about the Lubavitcher Rebbe's move? I'm going to go through the show, but I'm not going to talk about it, not going to make it simmus about it. I'm going to focus on Simcha Shel Mitzvah, and by the way, did I say Simcha Shel Mitzvah? And not talk about anti-Semitism, and not talk about the haters. I'm going to talk about why we love doing Judaism. What do you think about that? What's your assessment of that move? And do you do that move? Can you do that move? Should we do that move?
I would say proof is in the pudding. I think the pudding is pretty good. I mean, Chabad is thriving around the world. We see people all over the world who are pretty secular, who love Chabad and love going to Chabad. Kids on college campuses. They have the best food, the best alcohol, the best experience. Like, Chabad
They
is
know
where
your
to
name.
be. They know your name. And I think they're crushing it. And I think...
know everybody's name.
Yeah. But I think, I think that's what we should be doing. And I think
But
we
what
can
about
couple
this
that.
whole? What about Boulder? And what about Washington? What about Sarah and Yaron?
So I don't.
What do we do with Boulder?
I don't
what do we
buy
do with
that
Sarah
he
and Yaron?
only did that. What I think is his Torah was when you're in the world, when you're teaching, when you're building community, you build community on a premise of positivity. And all of us have our own work to grieve through the pains of our lives and the pains of our world. And that's true today.
Elias, could you bring us home by singing that Ani Ma'amin?
You don't want to talk about Jeremiah?
We run out of time, my friend. Come to Shul, and for next Bahar, we'll talk about Jeremiah. But I think your singing will be our Jeremiah. Jeremiah is about a counter vision where we're not stuck in this present. We're going to imagine a different world. The only thing I'll say about Jeremiah is we all know, everybody who's watching this knows the core of Jeremiah, which is Ode. Ayin Vav Dalet, Ode Yeshama Ba'arei Yehuda. And that ode actually comes from the Haftarah from Bahar, where he's stuck in jail, and the Babylonians are coming. And he's stuck in jail because he tells the king that the Babylonians are coming. And while he's in jail, you can hear the Babylonians coming. And he buys real estate in Anatot because one day there will still be real estate bought and sold in Jerusalem. And it's about that ode. And whenever we go to a wedding, Ode Yishama Ba'arei Yehuda, when you believe that despite the present ode, there will still be a better moment, that's Jeremiah. And our question is, what does that ode look like for us now? And our work is to dream up an ode and to make it happen. So that's what we believe in. We'd love to hear that.
Can we-
Ani Ma'amin.
Can I disagree with you? Can we
Of
sing all
course.
together Kol Haolam Kulo, because it's better words, you know? The world
I
is
don't sing either way, so
the
it's
world
whatever you
is a
think.
narrow bridge, but the
Okay.
most important thing is not to be afraid.
Go
Revolt.
for it.
Kol Haolam Kulo, Geshem Tzar Meod. You can sing, Wes.
Geshem Tzar Meod. Geshem Tzar Meod. Kol Haolam Kulo. Geshem Tzar Meod. Geshem Tzar Meod. Ve'ayikar, ve'ayikar, lo לפחד כלל. ve'ayikar, ve'ayikar, lo לפחד כלל.
Shabbat Shalom.